because Jack Straw brought this up back in 2011 and said it is a cultural issue. They do it because they don't value these girls, because they don't share the same faith as them.
And in some of the reports, the word Pakistani had been Tipexed out.
My mind's changed entirely in the last 10 years by this evil death cult that appears to have the left has morphed into.
Certain lives don't have value. And at the moment, they're unborn babies and very old, ill people.
There he is, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Hang on. I'll get him on somehow. Bosh, there we go.
No.
Nick, it's been a while. I was just telling the viewers that you would surely have some good local news stories we could discuss because...
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But before we get to that, let me tell you Frankie Boyle's best joke that I ever heard. He said he'd just watched the execution of Saddam Hussein, and he said something along the lines of, "I'm completely shocked. I thought I'd hit my limit of what I'd masturbate over on the internet."
See, that's not bad either.
That's funny.
Not bad either, yeah. That's not bad. Definitely wouldn't do that again, would he?
No, he's now a pathetic joke. Now he's a joke.
He'll be anti-capital punishment now as well, won't he? Because the Guardian is. Because don't you think that's one of the most fascinating things about this woke stuff is it makes them so boring all the time, and this is what good like right-wing YouTubers who do film reviews have talked about. It makes them boring in every way because you and I will disagree on occasion. You know, you'll get like very conservative people, for example, who are like 100% dead set against abortion. And I'm not. I take a more nuanced position on it because I think I come from an older liberal position. But we disagree about that. But if you talk to someone that's woke, it doesn't matter what the subject is. If they tell you one position they hold, you know what they think about every single position in the whole world. It could be euthanasia, abortion, gun control, economics, welfare, education, housing, LGBT rights, anything. I already know every single position they have. So what's the point in talking to them? And when you watch their entertainment, if the hero's woke, you know what he's going to do throughout the entirety of the show. He's going to have zero flaws, and you know his position on everything. And the women have never got any flaws, because if you show a woman with any flaws, that's sexist, so they can't grow as a character. So these people are just boring. I think that's why I get so angry all the time. I'm just bored. I'm bored of everything they say and everything they make. So anyway, I'm not going to rant about that. What have you been up to in the last couple of weeks? I haven't talked to you for a while.
There's three things that have happened this week in the UK which are shocking. The first one was the Baroness Casey report that this Labour government commissioned to initially look at, has there been a cover-up, a political cover-up over the grooming gangs in the UK, the Pakistani grooming gangs. Baroness Casey has spent several months looking at it, come back with an interim report because we need a full inquiry, but she's come back and said, yes, there is. So now you're not far right anymore now to use the term Pakistani grooming gang, because she said they are Pakistani grooming gangs. They're overrepresented. Muslims are overrepresented as well. And the new phase of this now is there's a lot of asylum seekers now involved in rape gangs as well in the UK. So we keep importing more of them. She then looked at many things, but two things that jumped out to me was she said she got her hands on quite a few reports done by government and councils. And in some of the reports, the word Pakistani had been Tipexed out. Old-fashioned Tipex had been Tipexed out the report because they didn't want the word Pakistani next to the phrase grooming gang, because part of the cover-up, they could not admit that bit. And the next thing was, for the last 3-4 years, every time we talk about the grooming gangs, somebody always sends a clip of the BBC or something news article saying Home Office reports states most members of grooming gangs are white British men. And when that came out 4 years ago, it was like, no, I'm not having that. Of course, some white British men are involved, scumbags everywhere, but they're not the majority. And Baroness Casey has looked at that statement and the government report it was in and has come out and said it was made up. There's no evidence backing that up whatsoever. Someone in the Home Office said it. It went into a report, and they've used that for 4 years to bat away accusations that it was a Pakistani grooming gang problem. So that report now is out there. Keir Starmer is now said he's going to launch a national inquiry. That sounds good, but we need to be careful about the terms of reference. There's rumours coming out now that he's not going to allow this national inquiry to look at politicians, the police, Westminster, Whitehall. It's all going to be about trying to find more pedos, which is fine. Find them, prosecute them. But that ain't the problem for me. I want some serious politicians in the dock, and I want them in jail. That's the number one. Well, there's 3 stories, but that's the first one. So I'll let you comment on that.
Well, first of all, I can change this banner outlook for an old one. There's an old one. It still makes sense. It's still relevant. State-funded struggle snuggles. That's what we've got. Because essentially, we are paying for these people. We are paying our taxes to house the people that attack our kids. And the government and the Home Office help facilitate it all the time. I think I did. It's good you brought that up, right? Because I was out there for a week or two and I didn't make a video covering it, the Casey report. So it's good to talk about. I think all that stuff as well, anyone who even pays remote attention to the news on a daily basis knew all this before we had the Casey report.
Yeah.
Or at least we've now got something official. Like, especially one, I can tell you, anyone with eyes knows. Because Jack Straw brought this up back in 2011 and said it is a cultural issue. They do it because they don't value these girls, because they don't share the same faith as them. And in their part of the world and in their religion, they say if they don't practice that faith and they go out wearing short skirts, they basically deserve it. But that was covered in 2011. Well, another aspect of it is related to what you're saying about when them just blatantly lying about these grooming gangs. When you get white nonces like Gary Glitter, he got caught because he took his laptop to PC World, which is like, first of all, it's hilarious he was that thick. But secondly, they keep it in the shadows. Of course you get white nonces, but what you never get them doing is telling all the mates, oh, hey, I'm rattling a 12-year-old, lads, and all the mates going, nice one, let's all have a go. That's a key element of it because it's part of their religious ideology. So, of course, there's no shame in it. They teach them, oh, of course, brother, you never, ever do it to a nice, modest believer. But it's fine doing it to a non-believer because they don't matter. It even says in our holy book that it doesn't matter. So everyone who knows anything knew straight off the bat that was a preposterous thing to say. Of course you get white nonsense, but you never, ever get with them in gangs of 20 or going to the local and telling all the blokes, oh, I've got a 14-year-old at home, come and have a blast, lads. Because 9 out of 10 blokes in here that would want to punch your face in. Because we have a universal respect for kids. It doesn't depend on what their faith is. So, first of all, there's that. And then the second thing I'll add is definitely concur with you, and that's why we need to get people like you in positions of authority. These people need to be held accountable. I'm sick of us only going after you know how the coppers on the American films, they're always saying they want to get the big fish.
Yeah.
Well, the big fish in this isn't the ones doing the surprise sexing. It's the people who facilitate it. We can lock up all them thousands of nonsense all we like, but I want to see the heads roll. I want to see these high up people in the Home Office. Philip Rutnam has been public enemy number 1 for me ever since the Manchester bombing, because Philip Rutnam made that happen. He was in charge of the Home Office at the time. Google it. He's blocked me on Twitter twice because I've had more than one account. I hound him every chance I get. Philip Rutnam was in charge during all that era where we've took in jihadis from Libya, and he knew that there were problematic people because there were jihadis fleeing Gaddafi. And they turned up in Manchester and he rubber-stamped all their paperwork and said, yeah, they're the dangerous religious reactionaries, but of course we're going to give them a council house in Manchester. So to me, he helped kill those children in the Manchester Evening News arena, and any politician who gave succour and shelter on the taxpayers' dime to people that have tortured and have ruthlessly abused children should be doing 25 years for it, at a minimum. But I mean, that's another discussion if we go down the capital punishment route. What else have you got for me?
So before we move on, I want people to understand why this happens. It happened because mainly Labour politicians and Labour council areas rely heavily on the bloc Muslim vote. If you can get the half dozen mosques on your side, they will preach at elections that you all should vote for this person, and it's usually a Labour Party. So Labour politicians didn't necessarily support paedophilia and weren't necessarily, some of them were involved, they've been prosecuted, not necessarily involved, but they wanted the votes. They were willing to sacrifice the lives of our children for votes so they could get into power and stay into power. That's how it started. Then MPs, Westminster found out, and then they went, we need to cover up the cover-up, because if this breaks, it's going to damage the Labour Party, it's going to damage Westminster, it's going to damage the country. So people higher up started covering up the cover-up, and then it got to a stage where no one could ever admit this because the cover-up's too deep. I predict that when we get to the bottom of this, there'll be sitting MPs in the House of Commons at the moment who will be prosecuted because some of them were running councils at the time. Some of them have been told for years and years what's going on. Some will be Tory, but most of them will be Labour. And that's why this happens. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't one or two people looking the other way, maybe a bit stupid. This was calculated for votes, the bloc Muslim votes in these areas. The police were told to do nothing about it by senior politicians. We sacrifice our kids for votes.
Unbelievable. Well, we've seen Angela Rayner doing it, didn't she? Begging for votes in front of all them blokes in the local bell end shaped church. Clearly, that's what they're doing. It's like I said, it is criminal. It's a phrase you say, isn't it, when you're angry about something? Oh, it's bloody criminal. But that is criminal. There's lots of laws against facilitating trafficking, and we should make use of them and make sure these people pay the ultimate price for it, which is at minimum 25 years in jail, and at best we'll maybe change a few laws and bring back some very old ones, one of which usually involves a electrified seating arrangement. But that's another conversation. Find a way abandons me a super chat. They only go left once the careers start to fail. Well, we know why that is, because you don't have to be competent to be right wing. You have to actually have some good ideas. To be left, you can do whatever, you can say whatever you want. Look at the difference. You can tell that because you get people like AOC or Diane Abacus who are genuinely stupid, like they don't know anything. And you can complain about the Republicans or the right wingers, but I can't think of one who's as stupid. Like, can you think of a Tory who's as thick as Diane Abbott? Because I can't.
Well, to give Diane Abbott some due, I don't think she was always thick. I think she's suffering from dementia or something over the last decade. She got into Cambridge at a time when there was no DEI. So I'm not sure she used to be stupid, but that's how she comes across now. But on the right, anyone stupid on the right? Not at those levels. Not when they come across as a joke. No,
I think Lisa Nandy, she's an idiot. Rachel Reeves is an idiot. Like, I can't think of anyone on the right. People who I despise in the Conservative Party, like Tobias Elwood, he's slippery. He's Machiavellian and he's sneaky. He's devious, but he's not stupid. On the left, anyone can be a lefty and get into politics because you just have to spew the platitudes. Yeah, Green Party's especially bad. They're absolute morons. They don't know the basics of economics. Someone like Jeremy Hunt is clearly intelligent. He's just a rat. But he's not a plank. No. Only the left have plank. Nandi Pandy, I wouldn't let her walk my dog. I'd expect her to somehow bugger it up, and the dog ends up in the wood chipper. These people are raving lunatics. Find Your Way band follows up. There are chimpanzees with brain trauma that would beat Abacus in a quiz. Probably. Perhaps Nick's right, though. Maybe there's some of that is related to age. I will say I don't recall her wearing 2 odd shoes until she was at least in her 50s. So I'll give you that one. What else have you got for me?
Well, following on from the way we sacrifice our children, let's talk about how we're now really sacrificing our children. A new law was passed in the Commons the other evening after a 1-2 hour debate. We debated ending fox hunting for something like 700 hours. This law we debated for 2 hours, and it's basically legalizing abortion in the UK up to the second the baby's born. Yeah. Now so it's a bit more complicated than that, so I don't want to misrepresent what went on. So it's 24 weeks in the UK to have a no question asked abortion. After 24 weeks to birth, it's still legal in the UK. You just need a doctor to sign it off, and there has to be a medical reason. And that can be as little as a cleft palate, a club foot. And we do about 200-300 of those late-term abortions every year in the UK. No one knows this, but we do that now. But during COVID, some woman at 40 weeks got some drugs online and aborted her own baby, got found out, got sent to jail. She got like a year, ended up doing 3 weeks. Sympathy, woman, can't do any wrong, got her out. And then there was a movement then saying this can't be right. We should never send a woman to jail for abortion. So any woman in the UK now, this law isn't actually on the books yet. It has to go to the Lords first, but they voted for it in the Commons. So the new law will be any woman who aborts her baby up to birth will not be prosecuted going forward. Now, so doctors can't be involved because they'll be prosecuted for child destruction. So what this means now, we're going to have a booming trade now online of illegal drugs for women to take up to birth to kill the babies. And we're going to have a booming trade now in backstreet abortions because there's no consequences for that mother. And the mother is the person who's supposed to love that child the most in the world, who's supposed to be protecting that child the most in the world. And she will now not be held accountable when she murders her baby.
Disgraceful. See, this is why it's this is another, you pick all the best topics. This is a good one to talk about because, as I said to you, I was never against abortion. To me, that was an argument that predominantly sprang from deeply held religious convictions. And in the 90s in the UK, it was something we never even really considered. We did like a sort of pro and con 2 weeks of it or something in PSE in school. It was more or less settled in, the more agnostic, wishy-washy Church of England sort of UK. And it wasn't something I ever thought about, so I always supported it. But again, it was in an era where common sense prevailed and there weren't all complete psychopaths doing these monstrous things that are so self-evidently wrong. Like, for example, nobody gets pregnant behind their own back, right? The virgin birth, if you're like me, you don't think that was true. And if you do, it's going to be an aberration. You don't get pregnant behind your own back. You're not going to get to 27, 30, 40 weeks and not know it. So the window shouldn't go all the way to bloody 40 weeks or anything like that. 30 or something, it should cap out, in my humble opinion. And second of all, they're removing the idea that women don't routinely do things out of spite. The phrase, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Every man, I have a theory about it. Well, every man who's ever had a messy breakup knows that to be true. Every man knows someone I've known plenty, who were mortified because out of pure spite and naked hatred, the mothers keep them away from the children, ignore the court orders. I had a mate, Daz, who I used to work with, who just hadn't seen his kids for 4 years. And he was devastated and he'd been to court like 5 times. And she said no matter what we do, she just ignores them. She'll never, ever bring them to see me, ever. And she fills their heads with poison every day. So this is cast iron example of when you have a messy breakup, you've got a woman who's 30 weeks pregnant. What does she start doing? She'll start holding a knife to the baby's throat and she'll use it as ammunition against the ex and say, oh, well, if you're going to do that, I might just poison the baby. And they're immune from prosecution in every circumstance. a blanket ban. So even just someone like me who leans towards being pro-abortion logically says you don't bump up the weeks so you can do it at any point that you think's fine. You don't give them blanket bans from prosecution. You don't promote back alley abortions. There's dozens of things wrong with it if you're a 90s liberal who was never against it in the first place. And that, I think that's cast iron for anyone who's even remotely impartial on the subject. A blanket ban from prosecution is preposterous. They're just killing children.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said, the legal limit at the moment for no questions asked is 24 weeks. Most babies who are born premature at 22 weeks survive. We've even had a few babies born at 18, 19 weeks who have survived. So if you get to 24 weeks and you don't want that baby, do you know what? That's your choice if you don't want it. But killing it isn't an option.
No.
You give birth to it, and
it gets adopted.
Do you know how many people we have on the waiting list in the UK for adopting newborn babies? It's tens of thousands. It would go in a split second to a good home. That is a better outcome than murdering a viable child.
100%.
Yes.
100%. So I mean, like I said, so my mind's changed entirely in the last 10 years by this evil death cult that appears to have the left has morphed into. Logically, you would say if the child's viable, then you shouldn't be allowed to kill it, periodly, because it's a viable child. So what you do is you leave it at a low end, like 24 weeks or something, and you throw the book at people that kill babies. If it's a viable kid, have it, give it up for abortion. That's a reasonable position. You know what I'm saying? And I was always, coming at this from a liberal point of view when as a teenager, you're fed lies by the teachers who were saying, oh, yeah, but it's always these vanishingly rare worst case scenarios. They're always like, oh, yeah, what if your sister gets gangbanged by 20 Jamaicans against her will? And then she's got she's got an 8-week-old fetus and it's barely a lump of cells. Shouldn't she be allowed to get an abortion? And you go, of course she should. But they don't say, all right, your sister's a slapper, gets knocked up, doesn't do anything about it because she's lazy until 7 months in, and then she just cuts his throat. That's all right, isn't it? They'd never put it that way when they're educating children. When they're educating children, it's the 9-week incest gang rape victim.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And that happens, and there's probably a dozen of them a year in the UK, a dozen of them. But do you know how many babies we abort in the UK every year?
I don't even want to know.
250,000 a year in the UK.
Yeah, it's disgraceful.
And do you remember the first time you found out about the Aztecs, about human sacrificing their children? Didn't you go, Jesus, they were evil. How could they ever do that to their children? They were killing hundreds of thousands a year. That's what we're doing now. And we look upon them still as evil. We look down upon other countries at the moment, female genital mutilation. Those African Muslims are terrible, And then we look at, in India killing, or China killing baby girls because they only want. But we look at them going, evil, evil, evil. We never look at ourselves, do we? 250,000 babies every year in the UK we murder.
I totally agree with you. So, like I said, talking about this stuff's interesting because it is you get them both sides of the argument in a better fashion than I'd stumble across myself. It's not a topic I've thought about too much since I was a kid. But as I said, it seems totally reasonable and logical to just go back to. I mean, think of this. I've used this in many different ways. I just think back to when the world was sane in about 1995, and if I'm uneducated about the subject, I go, I'll tell you what. Do what they were doing in 1995. Like before Blair came in, when the world made sense, that's my blanket statement. If I'm not really in the weeds on a topic and I don't know too much about it, I instantly go, I'll tell you what, do what they were doing in 95, because the world made sense then. Immigration made sense in 1995. We had a trickle. We didn't have hundreds of thousands of people coming in every year. Abortion in 1995, it was probably, capped at 24 weeks or something. And no ludicrous blanket bans on prosecution. We've just gone evil. And then we can lean into the next subject, right? Because this takes us neatly into it.
Yep.
At the same time, they've made euthanasia legal, right?
That was my next talking point.
And let me lead with this. I was always pro-euthanasia because my mum died of cancer.
Yeah.
And I watched it and I went, how can a judge who doesn't know our family have a weighing on this? Surely it should be down to my mum and my dad and possibly some close family members, but that's it. So I was always chippy about it. I was like, yeah, it really annoys me that just because other people are very Christian or whatever, they don't think you should do it. But again, because the world's gone completely mad, now I'm not comfortable with it because I know for a fact if I get into the weeds on it, with this death cult that's running affairs, it won't be, only if you're terminally ill and only if you've got all these safeguards in place. It'll be like, you're having a shit week? Top yourself, son. Like that's where we're going to end up. Because if we did that with the abortion stuff, why wouldn't we do that with the euthanasia stuff? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So tell me, elucidate further.
Yeah, so this euthanasia bill has now passed the Commons. It's going to go to the Lords again, so it's not on the statute books yet, but it's been passed by the House of Commons. And that is people who are so-called terminally ill, which has been approved by a doctor, will be state murdered, put to sleep. If you'd asked me 20 years ago, I probably would have said, yeah, I sort of agree. People suffering at the end of life, but when you look into it, and first of all, you have to realise the government will be running this. The government runs the government.
Alarm bells straight away. Yeah,
there we go. So government runs nothing at a competent level. Now, a government and the NHS is looking at you as a dying old person and going, you're going to last another 6 months. You're going to cost us £750,000 every year. And you might drag it out for another couple of years. It makes sense to us and our bottom line on our stretched resources. You're dying anyway. Let's put you out of your misery. We'll also have some evil scumbags who are the children of these people. Mum, you know you're dying. You're in pain, Mum. And at the moment, all your savings are being used by the hospital, by your care home. You're now bankrupting little Jenny. Little Jenny might not be able to ever buy a house or go to university. You're using all her inheritance now, Mum. In that a bit, I can see that happening. I probably know people who would say shit like that to a dying relative to get their hands on their 2 million house. So all these things. And I'm not religious, but I think I've come to the conclusion now that life has value or it doesn't have value. And what we've done in our country now is we've said certain lives don't have value. And at the moment, they're unborn babies and very old, ill people. Doesn't mean it's going to stay at those two extremes. I can foresee in the future, you've got the wrong political views, mate. It's time you went. All these things. This is what happened to the Jews. The Jews aren't human. The Jews are less than us. And if we can deem people less than us as an animal, humans kill animals extremely easily. So we've either got value or we haven't got value. And it's a slippery slope if we hand all these powers over to the state.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Again, so well done. You've done a better job talking me around on those two subjects than almost anyone else I've talked to. Because I can't shoot that argument down. Like, like I said, when I was young and naive, I had a chip on my shoulder about it because of my personal circumstances. But as you say, the last 20 years have proved what happens when the state gets too much power, say over life and death. And the other thing that really makes me skeptical about them is not just that they're grossly incompetent and hypocritical, but that they flip on a penny the second it suits them. Because during the pandemic, when I started my channel, enraged about the lockdowns, and they were calling me and anyone who dared disagree with them a granny killer. They're like, oh, granny killer, granny killer, granny killer, granny killer. Now it's gone away. They're like, kill you, granny. Like, how have they got on that side of it so fast? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. We also need to look at personal responsibility, because people have had this argument with me before that I've seen a family member die like this. My wife died like this. That's why I support it. And my answer to that is, I get that. I really, really get that. My mum hasn't died in agony. She's still alive. But if she was dying in agony, I would take responsibility. I would speak to her. I would arrange something. I would arrange for her to take a lethal overdose. I would arrange something. I don't expect the state to make me feel better, do what needs to be done, because I'm too scared to take consequences when my loved one is dying. If I thought she needed to end, thought her life needed to be ended for the benefit of her, I'm not sure how I'd do it. I would sort it out, and then I would take the consequences afterwards. What I'm not prepared to do is give all my personal responsibility to the state, because that's what we keep doing in the UK. We're a semi-socialist state at the moment. Anything goes wrong, what the state doing about it? I lose my job, I can't get a job. What's the state doing about it? There's dirt outside my house, litter. What are the state doing about it? I'm sick of us thinking like that. Our first response should be, what am I going to do about that? Well, I'm going to sweep up the litter outside my house. I'm going to look harder to get a job. I'm going to look for retraining. I'm going to do whatever needs for me to be a better person and get a job. And we keep looking at the state fixing our problems. And that's why nothing improved, because I've worked for the state. I worked for government for 10 years. You wouldn't believe the level of incompetence in the state sector. And you also need to understand the state doesn't care. You have a number, you have a problem. The state never cares about you as an individual like you would care about anyone you've ever met. The state doesn't care. You have a number, and it does everything really, really, really poorly.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with you. And again, think of it. All they care about is coin. They've proved this. The scumbag politicians, all they care about is coin. A very good point about them trying to shuffle you off early, because my mum held on because of the kids. She really wanted to see me go to secondary school, and she died a couple of weeks before I got there, so she never made it. But she was clinging on for that. If she made the choice, if she had a month to go and she was absolutely hanging out, because it is awful, she looked like a skeleton at the end, and she said to my dad, "You know what? I'm not that bothered. Do me in." Then my dad would have just went and surreptitiously saved the morphine that she had, because they give you stuff like that.
Yeah.
Save it up and just give her like a quadruple dose and took care of it. Safe in the knowledge that when you go through the legal process, no one's ever going to convict a doting husband for killing a woman 3 weeks before she's going to die anyway. But if the state's doing it, they'll go, crikey, she might live another 4 years. Like killing a donkey out the back of the shed. Like the psychopaths that run the state do not give a single shit. So you've talked me around, mate. I'm impressed. Well done. But it's ludicrous, isn't it? As I said, that I just found it grimly amusing when I was reading some of the stuff on Twitter this morning. I was like, that's what they did. They said Bootneck's a granny killer, Bootneck's a granny killer, and now they're like, go on, Bootneck. Kill your granny. She's only got 4 or 5 years left in her anyway. Like, the world's gone completely mad. And as I said, the abortion and the euthanasia debate I've completely flipped on, because, not completely on abortion. As I said, I think it's the mad thing, though, isn't it? Like you're talking about, they always use the exceptions. Always. If you get surprise sex by a gang of blokes, for the first 3 months, you're probably going to take a pregnancy test every few weeks. Like, you'll get it early. The only people who want to do it after about 26 weeks or something are psychopaths who don't feel anything. Like, if you had a 30-week-old bump in your stomach and it's a viable child, a normal woman who somehow, one of the 0.1% who wouldn't have knew about it would say, I'll just put up for adoption then. Only a psychopath or someone playing games with a man would go, I'll just pull it out and wring its neck, bury it in the backyard. I honestly think the people running the world are genuinely malevolent at this point. Like I said to you, I don't think it's incompetence. I think it's malevolence at this point.
Do you remember the time when politicians used to spend all their time protecting us from foreign enemies, protecting us from criminals, protecting us from diseases? And this last 20 years, we've got to a stage now where they don't protect us from foreign pedos and rapists. They don't protect us from being murdered in the womb. They don't protect us from being murdered when we're old and sick. And it's like, When did politicians forget their duty? Their duty is to protect us. And when did the men of the UK forget that their primary role is protector, second comes provider? When did men forget their role? We've been over-feminized, and men now just want to have manicures and be pink and fluffy and go along with whatever women say as long as they can sleep with them. Sleep with them, not my responsibility. I get the fun. I don't have to look after you. The state will raise my children for me if I don't want to stay with the mum. Women think exactly the same. And most women who have abortions have already had several abortions before. So they're using it as like a birth control method.
Yeah, they are. And that's another thing that they always said had never happened. Again, in the 90s, they were like, the religious rights say, they use it as birth control, as if a woman's going to do that. And then 2025, you see them with banners going, ha ha, I've had 12 abortions. Like, okay, so you are then. It's crazy time to be alive. It's totally shameless, totally brazen, and led by the scum of the earth. I'll tell you one thing before we go. I read a thing with Andrew Tate, which, again, demonized him a lot worse than he deserves. Sometimes he says bollocks. Sometimes he doesn't, like anybody else. And he put a tweet out yesterday that I found myself nodding and agreeing on. I showed my missus it, and she was like, flawless logic. And he was saying, everyone wants to blame men for everything. It was like, back in the 50s or the 60s, you don't even have to go back that far, when we had a virtuous society, fathers and brothers looked after women's virginity themselves because society policed them. You look down on women that behaved ludicrously like Bonnie Blue. And he was like, if you think about it, that was kind of feminist because they were making sure, because we all know what men are like, they were making sure that you'd sort of engage in a lengthy courtship with them before you put out, because then they're going to stay with you. They value you as a woman. And they're going to stay with you, and then they're going to have a family with you, you're going to have children with you. And when we started saying to these women, you know what's way better idea? Be a girl boss, be a careerist, and just get rattled by 10 sailors every weekend for a few years. It'll be great. And no men want anything to do with you after that. It's actually deeply harmful for women, like massively harmful. I don't think it's sexist to say that, for example, everyone knows Bonnie Blue. They talk about body count, these young people. Everyone knows Bonnie Blue's been rattled by thousands of men.
Yeah.
She will never be able to find a normal, maybe some weirdo pervert, but no bloke will go out with her now. If me and you and 20 of our mates were sat in the pub and she walked in, you wouldn't go, I'm going to go and fancy my chances with her. Because no, it's human nature. You don't want to settle down and have a family and marry a woman like that. You want to marry a woman who's chaste and virtuous. So all this is done, bizarrely, he, with his opinions, saying that, is doing more to help women by telling them maybe you should be chaste than these women who say, I'm an ultra-feminist, I'm pushing forward girl power. Because all you're doing is making sure that these women are always going to be single and childless and miserable. Because I think anyone watching this, and we're both married, can agree that seems like women are happiest when they're married and they have a family and they have stability and they have someone who actually cares about them instead of just having one night stands. Because even as men, I mean, I did it when I was in my early 20s and I was a young bootneck, but looking back, you don't really get anything from it. You want a relationship with someone who actually gives a shit about you, don't you? So it's very strange how someone like Andrew Tate seems to be doing more for women than women.
This is the outcome of 70 years of feminism. Women, every decade, women, since the 60s, women now, every decade, it's increased every decade, women report more and more unhappiness. And every decade we get more and more feminist policies, and every decade they're more and more unhappy. There's reports out there now, scientific reports, that if a woman has had more than 5 sexual partners, she then struggles to pair bond with men in the future. She may sleep with them, she may have relationships, but that internal wanting to bond forever breaks down. Hence why I think like 80% of all divorces now are instigated by women. This push for abortion, women are pushing it. This suicide bill, women are pushing it. Women are out of control in the Western world because they've stepped out of their comfort zone, their world. There used to be a man's world and a woman's world, and women steps out of their world into the men's world, and they're not designed for it. And that's where many of our problems lie. And I wrote a book on it. I wrote a book on feminism, and most of our problems you can trace back to that evil ideology.
Interesting. What was the book called about feminism? I'll look it up and I'll get a copy.
It's called Feminism, Feminism, Myths, Lies and Ungratefulness. You can get it on Amazon. It's about £6-7 or something.
I'll give you a plug before we leave. Hang on, I'll just look it up on Amazon. There we go. Put it in the chat.
Yep. So most of the things you think you understand about feminism is all wrong. It had nothing to do with the right to vote. That was all a myth. Even feminists today, all the old feminists today, I quote them in a book, they're saying, yeah, it's nothing to do with votes. No, it was a female supremacy movement that came out of the anti-slavery movement 200 years ago, mixed with Marxism. And that's why women have always portrayed themselves as victims, the victim, the oppressor, the oppressed. Marxism heavily influenced feminism. And once you discuss it, you realize none of it makes sense. I trace it all the way back to the beginning, all the way up to modern day. Feminism, we're behind the LGBTQ movement, all these things and this liberation of sex. And that's damaged women the most. Women are born with their value. Women are born and have value straight away. And it's their sexuality, it's their youthfulness, it's their beauty, it's their ability to have children. Men are born worthless. Men have to spend their lives gaining value through, combat, through collecting resources, to getting a good job, whatever it is. And women throw away their value in their teens and 20s, and they get to their 30s and they go, right, I want to settle down now. And men go, no, there's nothing of value in you anymore now. I might as well go for that 22-year-old who isn't a slapper. So women don't understand what men think and what men want, and are trying to be men, and they're just inferior versions of men. Just like lots of men are trying to be women, and they're inferior versions of women. Who wants an inferior version of anything?
That's a good that's a good little screen to end on, Nick. That makes tons of sense. And ultimately, people will disagree, but as always, I go for ruthless pragmatism and logic. If you look at the numbers for suicide, anxiety, depression, addiction with women now compared to in the 80s, it's not even remotely close. So what else is it?
20% of British women are on antidepressants.
Unbelievable.
20%.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And they keep on doing what they know is bad for them. Yeah. So no wonder they're in bother. Anyway, right, we'll call it there because that's an hour and 10, and that's all that I talk fast, so it kicks the shit out of my voice box. Thanks for coming on and giving me a bit of a rest, though, Nick. I enjoyed that.
You're welcome. I enjoyed that anytime. You know me, anytime.
Yeah, we get on. And next time I'm on, we'll definitely go for a pint. I'll risk venturing into Manchalabad just to get with you for a beer. And thanks for coming on. I plugged your book, and I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Excellent. See you later.
Cheers, Nick. See you, mate.
Bye-bye.